The sharp crack of a Winchester rifle echoed across Ryder's property as the sun dipped below the Wyoming horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. He hadn't meant to startle the trespasser, only to warn whoever was rustling around in his barn that he was armed and aware. The shot had been aimed well above the structure, but the frightened gasp that followed told him he'd scared someone half to death. Elijah lowered his rifle and approached the barn cautiously, his spurs jingling with each deliberate step. At 32, he'd learned that in Lusk, Wyoming, territory, circa 1885, a man couldn't be too careful about who or what wandered onto his land. Rustlers, drifters, and all manner of desperate folk passed through these parts, especially since the railroad had come through 2 years prior. "I know you're in there," he called out, his voice firm but not threatening. "I ain't looking for trouble, but you're on private property." Silence greeted him as he pushed open the weathered barn door. The familiar sense of hay, horses, and leather enveloped him as his eyes adjusted to the dimness. Nothing seemed amiss among his 4 horses or the tack hanging neatly on the wall. The cow and her calf were undisturbed in their stall. It wasn't until Elijah climbed the ladder to the hayloft that he discovered the intruder. Curled up beneath a thin, tattered shawl and nestled in the fresh hay he'd put up just yesterday was a young woman. She appeared to be sleeping, though her breathing seemed too quick and shallow for genuine slumber. "Madam," Elijah said, keeping his distance, "you can stop pretending now. I know you're awake." The woman's eyes fluttered, open eyes the color of summer sage that widened with unmistakable fear. She scrambled backward, pressing herself against the wall of the loft. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I'll leave. I meant no harm." Elijah set his rifle down carefully, making sure it was out of reach. "I ain't gonna hurt you, miss. But I would like to know why you're sleeping in my hayloft." She swallowed hard, and in the fading light streaming through the gaps in the roof, Elijah could see that she was thin, too thin, with dark circles under her eyes and clothes that had seen better days. Her hair, a rich chestnut brown, was tied back in a hasty braid, wisps escaping to frame a face that, despite its current state of fear and exhaustion, held a striking beauty. I needed somewhere to sleep, just for the night. I'll be gone before sunrise." Elijah sighed, removing his hat to run a hand through his sandy brown hair. "You hungry?" The question seemed to surprise her. After a moment of hesitation, she gave a small nod. "Well, I've got stew on the stove and fresh bread. You're welcome to join me for supper before you go on your way." She regarded him suspiciously. "Why would you offer that to a trespasser?" Elijah shrugged. "My ma raised me to believe that turning away someone in need was a sin worse than most. Besides, you don't look like you're here to steal anything valuable." He offered a small smile. "I'm Elijah Ryder. Most folks just call me Eli." After a long moment of consideration, she replied, Emma Vale." "Well, Miss Vale, it's getting dark and that stew isn't getting any warmer. What do you say?" Emma hesitated, then slowly got to her feet, gathering her meager belongings, a small cloth bundle and the shawl, and followed him down the ladder. Elijah's cabin was modest but well maintained. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a cookstove beside it. A sturdy wooden table with 4 chairs sat in the center of the main room, while a rocking chair and small bookshelf created a cozy corner. Through a partially open door, Emma glimpsed a neatly made bed. "It's not much," Elijah said, suddenly self-conscious of his bachelor accommodations, "but it's home." "It's lovely," Emma replied softly, her eyes taking in the clean floors and the careful arrangement of necessities that spoke of a man who took pride in his surroundings. Elijah ladled the thick stew into 2 bowls and cut generous slices of bread, setting them on the table. Please sit. Emma perched on the edge of the chair as if ready to flee at any moment. Elijah pretended not to notice her unease as he took his own seat. Would you like to say grace? He asked. Emma looked startled, then lowered her eyes. Thank you, Lord, for this food and for kind strangers. Amen. Amen, Elijah echoed, then gestured to the food. Eat up. Emma tried to maintain some decorum, but her hunger soon overcame her manners. She ate quickly, though she frequently glanced up at Elijah as if expecting him to snatch the bowl away or make demands for payment. There's more if you want it, he offered when she'd nearly finished. Emma shook her head. This is more than enough. Thank you, Mr. Ryder. Illy, he corrected gently. Now, I don't mean to pry, but I'm guessing you're not from around here. Emma set down her spoon, tension returning to her shoulders. No, I arrived on yesterday's train from Denver, and you came to Lusk because I was told there might be work here. The mining operations, or perhaps as a seamstress or laundress. Elijah nodded. The silver mines north of town had brought a steady stream of workers and opportunity seekers to the area. Any luck? Emma's gaze dropped to the table. Not yet. The boarding house was full and the hotel. Costs more than you can spare right now, Elijah finished for her. Yes. A flush of shame colored her cheeks. I'll find something tomorrow. I just needed a place for the night. Elijah studied her for a moment. Emma Vale was clearly educated. Her speech was refined despite her current circumstances, and though she was trying to hide it, there was a wariness in her eyes that spoke of recent hardship. I've got a proposition for you, Miss Vale, he said finally. I could use some help around here. The spring roundup starts soon, and I'll be gone for days at a time. If you're willing to tend to the animals and keep the place in order while I'm away, you can stay in the spare room. It's small, used to be a pantry, but it's dry and warm. Emma's eyes narrowed. And what would you expect in return, Mr. Ryder? Besides the chores, I mean. The implication was clear, and Elijah felt a flush of indignation. Nothing improper, Miss Vale. I'm offering you honest work and a roof over your head, nothing more. There's a lock on the spare room door, and you're welcome to use it. He stood and carried his bowl to the wash basin. It's just an offer. You're free to refuse. Emma was quiet for a long moment. I apologize for my assumption. It's just that in my experience, men rarely offer something for nothing. I understand, Elijah said, though the statement troubled him. But the offer stands. You can stay tonight regardless and let me know your decision in the morning. Emma helped him clean up after supper, and Elijah showed her to the small room off the kitchen. It was indeed tiny, with just enough space for a narrow cot, a small table, and a peg for hanging clothes. It's not much, he said, lighting the lamp. It's perfect, Emma replied, genuine gratitude in her voice. Thank you, Illy. Good night, Miss Vale. Sleep well. As Elijah retired to his own room, he pondered the strange turn his evening had taken. There was something about Emma Vale, a dignity despite her circumstances, a strength beneath her vulnerability that intrigued him. But he reminded himself that she was likely just passing through, a temporary presence in his solitary life. Morning dawned crisp and clear, with the promise of spring in the air despite the lingering chill. Elijah rose early, as was his habit, and was surprised to find Emma already up, a pot of coffee brewing on the stove. Good morning, she said, a tentative smile on her face. I hope you don't mind. I thought I could at least have breakfast ready before I gave you my answer. And what might that answer be? Elijah asked, accepting the cup of coffee she offered. I would like to accept your offer of employment, Mr. Ryder, if it still stands. Elijah couldn't help but smile. It does. And it's Illy, remember. Illy, she corrected, her own smile widening slightly. Thank you. Over a breakfast of flapjacks and bacon, they discussed the details of their arrangement. Emma would care for the livestock, maintain the cabin, and prepare meals when Elijah was home. In exchange, she would receive room and board, plus a small wage that she insisted was more than fair when he named the amount. "I should show you around the place," Elijah said after they'd cleaned up, "so you know what needs doing." The tour began with the barn, where Elijah introduced Emma to the 4 horses, his prized stallion Thunder, 2 working geldings named Buck and Scout, and a gentle mare called Willow. "They're beautiful," Emma said, her hand outstretched to let Willow nuzzle her palm. "You ride?" Elijah asked. "I used to. It's been a while." Next came the cow Bessie and her calf, the chicken coop with a dozen laying hens, and the small vegetable garden that would need planting soon. "It's a lot of work for one man," Emma observed as they walked back toward the cabin. "It keeps me busy," Elijah replied with a shrug. "My pa started this place with just a tent and a dream, built it up bit by bit. When he passed 5 years ago, it fell to me to keep it going. No brothers or sisters, a sister, Caroline. She married a banker in Cheyenne, visits when she can." Elijah hesitated, then asked, "What about you? Any family?" Emma's expression closed off slightly. "Not anymore." Elijah didn't press. Everyone had parts of their past they preferred not to discuss. He had his own. The days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Emma proved to be a quick learner and a hard worker, taking to the ranch chores with determination if not always expertise. Elijah found himself enjoying her company during meals and the quiet evenings when they'd sit by the fire, him whittling or mending tack, her darning socks or reading from one of his small collection of books. He learned she had a fondness for poetry and could recite Tennyson and Longfellow by heart. She discovered he had a talent for storytelling, especially tales of the early days of the territory that he'd heard from his father. What Elijah didn't know was what had brought Emma Vale to Lusk with nothing but the clothes on her back and a small bundle of possessions. She never spoke of her past beyond vague references to having grown up back east, and Elijah respected her privacy too much to pry. A week passed, then 2. Spring unfurled across the Wyoming landscape, painting the prairie with wildflowers and fresh green grass. The days grew longer, and Elijah found himself looking forward to returning to the cabin each evening, to the warm glow of lamplight through the windows, and the knowledge that Emma would be there. It was during the 3rd week that Elijah announced he would be joining the roundup the following day. "I'll be gone for about 5 days, he told Emma over supper. "Maybe a week, depending on how many strays we find. Think you can manage here alone?" Emma nodded. "Of course. I've learned enough to keep things running smoothly." She hesitated, then added, "Please be careful." The simple statement, spoken with genuine concern, warmed something in Elijah's chest. "Always am." The next morning, he rode out before dawn, joining the other ranchers and their hands for the spring roundup. The work was grueling but satisfying, finding cattle that had wandered during the winter, branding new calves, and separating those bound for market. In the evenings around the campfire, the men shared stories and news. It was from Jackson Miller, who owned the mercantile in town, that Elijah first heard the rumors. "Say, Ryder," Jackson said, passing him a cup of coffee, "heard you got yourself a housekeeper." Elijah nodded, unsurprised that news had traveled. Lusk wasn't large, and gossip moved faster than telegrams. "Miss Vale, she's been a big help. Pretty thing, from what my wife says. She came into the store last week for supplies." "She's a hard worker," Elijah replied noncommittally. Jackson lowered his voice. "You might want to know there's been talk. A man came through town asking after a young woman matching her description. Seemed mighty interested in finding her." Elijah's hand tightened around his cup. "What man?" Didn't catch his name. Well-dressed fellow, though, had the look of money about him. Said he was a concerned relative. Elijah considered this information as he stared into the fire. Emma had never mentioned any relatives, concerned or otherwise, and if she had family with means, why had she arrived in Lusk alone and destitute? Did he say why he was looking for her? Jackson shrugged. Just said it was a family matter, left word at the hotel and the telegraph office to contact him if she turned up. I see. Elijah kept his tone neutral, though unease had settled in his gut. Thanks for letting me know. For the remaining days of the roundup, Elijah found his thoughts repeatedly turning to Emma and the mysterious man searching for her. Was she in some kind of trouble, running from something or someone? The questions nagged at him, along with the realization that he had come to care for Emma Vale far more than he'd intended. When Elijah finally rode back to his ranch 6 days later, tired and dusty but satisfied with the successful roundup, he found the place in perfect order. The animals had been well tended, the cabin was clean, and the scent of fresh baked bread greeted him as he opened the door. But Emma was nowhere to be found. "Emma," he called, a note of concern creeping into his voice as he searched the empty cabin. Her few belongings remained in the small room, including the book she'd been reading the night before he left, a marker still holding her place. Relief washed over him when he spotted her through the window, emerging from the chicken coop with a basket of eggs. He stepped back outside just as she noticed him. "Illy?" Her face lit up with a smile that made his heart skip a beat. "You're back." "Just now," he replied, taking the basket from her as they walked toward the house. "Everything all right here?" "Fine. Bessie's giving more milk, and I found where that old red hen was hiding her eggs." Emma studied his face. "How was the roundup?" "Successful. Got a good count, and the new calves look strong." Elijah hesitated, then added, "Heard some interesting news in town." He watched her carefully as he continued. "Seems someone's been asking after you. A well-dressed man claiming to be family." Emma's reaction was immediate and alarming. The color drained from her face, and the basket of eggs nearly slipped from her grasp. "Emma." Elijah steadied her with a hand on her arm. "Who is he?" She shook her head, her eyes wide with what could only be described as fear. "I need to go. I can't stay here." "Wait." Elijah guided her to the porch steps and sat beside her. "Talk to me. If you're in trouble, maybe I can help." Emma stared at her hands, now twisted tightly in her lap. After a long moment she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "His name is Victor Holloway. He's not family. He's the man I was forced to flee from in Denver." Elijah waited patiently as Emma gathered herself. When she continued, her voice was steadier, though still quiet. "I was a governess for a wealthy family in Denver, the Prescotts. They had 2 children, and I lived in their home. Mr. Holloway was a business associate of Mr. Prescott's, a frequent visitor to the house." She swallowed hard. "He developed an interest in me. At first it was just excessive attention, compliments, small gifts I couldn't accept. Then he began to find reasons to be alone with me." Elijah felt his jaw tighten. "Did he harm you?" he tried. "One night he cornered me in the library." "If Mr. Prescott hadn't returned home unexpectedly." Emma shuddered. "Afterward, I went to Mrs. Prescott, told her what happened. But Mr. Holloway is a powerful man in Denver society. He told them I had been inappropriate with him, that I was trying to seduce him for his money." "And they believed him," Elijah guessed, anger building in his chest. Emma nodded. "Mrs. Prescott dismissed me without a reference. Without that, I couldn't find another position in Denver. Mr. Holloway made sure of that. He said he would forgive my indiscretion if I agreed to become his mistress." "So you ran?" "I had to. He wouldn't take no for an answer. He started showing up wherever I went, sending notes, making threats." I took what little money I had saved and bought a ticket to the furthest place I could afford. Lusk, Elijah said softly. Yes, I thought I'd be safe here, that he wouldn't follow. Emma looked up at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I'm sorry, Illy. I never meant to bring trouble to your door. I'll leave first thing in the morning. No. The word came out more forcefully than Elijah intended. He softened his tone. No, Emma, you don't have to run anymore. This is your home now if you want it to be. But Holloway isn't welcome on my property. Elijah took her hand, surprised by his own boldness but needing to reassure her. You're safe here, Emma. I promise you that. The gratitude in her eyes nearly undid him. Thank you, but I don't want to put you in danger. I can handle myself. And Holloway strikes me as the type of man who preys on those he sees as weaker. He'll find I'm not so easily intimidated. A ghost of a smile touched Emma's lips. No, I don't imagine you are. That night, as Elijah lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he turned over everything Emma had told him. The thought of what she had endured, of the fear that had driven her to flee her home and seek shelter in a stranger's barn, filled him with a protective fury he hadn't known himself capable of. But beneath the anger was something else, a growing affection for the brave, resilient woman sleeping under his roof. An affection that, if he were honest with himself, had been there almost from the beginning. The next morning, Elijah rode into town to speak with Sheriff Davis about the situation. The sheriff, a grizzled veteran of both the war between the states and the frontier, listened with a grave expression. Ain't much I can legally do until this Holloway fellow actually shows up and causes trouble, Davis said, leaning back in his chair. But I'll keep an eye out. And if he comes nosing around asking questions, I'll be real vague about who might be living out your way. I appreciate that, Sheriff. Elijah stood to leave, then paused. If he does show up here looking for Emma, he won't be getting a friendly welcome. Sheriff Davis studied him for a moment. Just make sure whatever you do stays on the right side of the law, Ryder. I'd hate to have to arrest you for defending your own property. Elijah nodded and left, stopping by the mercantile to pick up supplies. Mrs. Miller, the proprietor's wife, gave him a knowing smile as she wrapped his purchases. That Miss Vale seems like a lovely young woman, she commented. Very polite, asked about sewing work in town. She is, Elijah agreed, not elaborating. My husband mentioned someone was looking for her, Mrs. Miller lowered her voice. I didn't like the look of him, though. Too smooth, eyes like a snake. If he comes back, Mrs. Miller, would you let the sheriff know? Or send word out to my place, she nodded, her expression serious. Of course, Mr. Ryder, we look after our own in Lusk. As Elijah rode home, he was struck by the realization that in the minds of the townsfolk, Emma had already become one of their own, and by extension, associated with him in a way that went beyond employer and employee. The thought didn't bother him as much as it probably should have. 3 days passed without incident. Emma seemed to relax slightly, though Elijah noticed she was more vigilant when they rode into town together to attend Sunday services. He made sure she was never alone, escorting her wherever she needed to go, and introducing her to those she hadn't yet met as Miss Vale, who's been helping me at the ranch. It was on the 4th day that trouble arrived in the form of a rented carriage coming up the road to Elijah's property. Emma spotted it first from where she was hanging laundry in the yard. Illy, she called, her voice tight with alarm. Elijah emerged from the barn, immediately understanding the cause of her distress. Get inside, Emma. Lock the door. She hesitated, then hurried to the cabin. Elijah wiped his hands on a rag and stood waiting as the carriage drew closer. The man who stepped down was exactly as Jackson had described, expensively dressed, with a gold watch chain across his vest and a derby hat that looked out of place in Wyoming territory. His face was handsome in a conventional way, but his eyes were cold and calculating as they took in Elijah and the ranch. "Good day," the man said, his tone pleasant but with an undercurrent of condescension. "I'm looking for a young woman who may be in this area. Emma Vale. I have reason to believe she might be working here." Elijah crossed his arms. "And you are Victor Holloway, a concerned friend of Miss Vale's family." He reached into his coat and produced a calling card which Elijah deliberately did not take. "Don't know any Emma Vale," Elijah lied smoothly. "I work this ranch alone." Holloway's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Now, Mr. Ryder, Elijah Ryder, Mr. Ryder, I have it on good authority that a young woman matching Emma's description has been seen in your company in town. Brown hair, green eyes, quite pretty despite her current circumstances." Elijah's jaw tightened. "Lot of pretty women in these parts, can't help you." Holloway's facade of civility slipped slightly. "Mr. Ryder, I don't think you understand. Emma is a disturbed young woman. She's fabricated some rather unpleasant stories about me after I rejected her inappropriate advances. Her family is quite concerned about her mental state." "That's so." Elijah took a step forward. "Funny thing is, Miss Vale told me she doesn't have any family left. So I'm wondering who exactly you're representing here, Mr. Holloway." The man's expression hardened. "I see she's poisoned your mind as well. A pity. I had hoped to resolve this matter quietly." He glanced toward the cabin. "I know she's here, Mr. Ryder, and I will be taking her back to Denver, one way or another." Elijah's hand moved to rest on the revolver at his hip. "I think it's time for you to leave, Holloway. My property isn't open to visitors today." Holloway's eyes narrowed at the implied threat, but he maintained his composure. "Very well, but this isn't over." He climbed back into the carriage. "Tell Emma I'll be staying at the hotel in town. When she's ready to be reasonable, she knows where to find me." Elijah watched until the carriage disappeared down the road before hurrying to the cabin. Emma was standing by the window, her face pale. "He's gone," Elijah assured her. "For now." "He won't give up," Emma said, her voice trembling slightly. "He's not the kind of man who accepts defeat. Neither am I." Elijah took her hands in his, surprised to find them ice cold despite the warmth of the day. "Emma, look at me. I won't let him harm you, I promise you that." Emma's eyes met his, and something passed between them, a current of emotion too complex to name. "I can't ask you to fight my battles, Illy." "You didn't ask, I'm offering." He hesitated, then added softly, "Because you've become important to me, more than I expected." A flush rose in Emma's cheeks, but she didn't look away. "And you to me." The confession hung in the air between them, changing something fundamental in their relationship. Elijah wanted nothing more than to draw her into his arms, to protect her from the dangers that pursued her, but he restrained himself. Emma had endured enough unwanted attention. He wouldn't add to her burden. Instead, he reluctantly released her hands and stepped back. "Holloway said he's staying at the hotel in town. I'll ride over to the sheriff's office, make sure Davis keeps an eye on him." Emma nodded, visibly gathering her composure. "I'll come with you. I should speak to Sheriff Davis myself, tell him what happened in Denver. Are you sure?" "Yes. It's time I stopped running and stood my ground." A determination had entered her eyes that Elijah hadn't seen before. "Besides, I refuse to become a prisoner here because of Victor Holloway." Elijah smiled, admiration swelling in his chest. "All right then. Let's ride into town together." Sheriff Davis listened gravely as Emma recounted her experiences with Holloway in Denver, occasionally making notes in a small book. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and stroked his mustache thoughtfully. "Well, Miss Vale, I can't arrest the man for what he did in Colorado. That's outside my jurisdiction. but I can keep an eye on him while he's here, and if he makes any threats or tries to harm you, then he'll find himself enjoying the hospitality of my jail." "Thank you, Sheriff," Emma said. "In the meantime," Davis continued, "I'd advise you to be careful. Don't go anywhere alone. And Mr. Ryder," he fixed Elijah with a meaningful look, "you have the right to defend your property and those under your protection, but let's try to keep this from turning violent if possible." Elijah nodded, though privately he wasn't sure violence could be avoided if Holloway persisted. As they left the sheriff's office, Elijah noticed Emma stiffen beside him. Following her gaze, he saw Holloway emerging from the hotel across the street. The man spotted them immediately, his lips curving into a smile that made Elijah's hand instinctively move toward his gun. "Miss Vale," Holloway called, crossing the street toward them. "How fortunate! I was just thinking about you." Emma stood her ground, though Elijah could feel her trembling slightly where their arms brushed. "Mr. Holloway, I have nothing to say to you. Come now, Emma. Surely we can discuss this like reasonable adults." Holloway glanced at Elijah with barely concealed disdain. "Perhaps somewhere more private. Miss Vale has made herself clear," Elijah said coldly. "She doesn't wish to speak with you." Holloway's smile tightened. "I don't believe I was addressing you, Mr. Ryder. This is between Emma and myself." "There is nothing between us," Emma said, her voice stronger now. "Please leave me alone, Mr. Holloway. I've spoken to Sheriff Davis about your behavior in Denver, and he's aware of the situation." Something dangerous flashed in Holloway's eyes. "You're making a grave mistake, Emma." "I've been patient, but my patience has limits. I've come a long way to find you, and I won't be leaving without what I came for." "Is that a threat, Mr. Holloway?" Sheriff Davis's voice came from behind them as he stepped out of his office, alerted by the confrontation. Holloway composed his features quickly. "Not at all, Sheriff. Merely expressing my disappointment in Miss Vale's continued stubbornness." He tipped his hat. "Good day to you all." They watched as he returned to the hotel, his back straight and his step unhurried. "I don't like the look of that one," Sheriff Davis muttered. "Got the eyes of a man who's used to getting his way, consequences be damned." "I agree," Elijah said grimly. "We'll be heading back to the ranch now, Sheriff. Thank you for your help." The ride home was tense, both of them scanning the road frequently to ensure they weren't being followed. Only when the ranch house came into view did Emma seem to relax slightly. "I'm sorry for bringing this trouble to your door, Ellie," she said as they dismounted. "Perhaps I should leave after all, find somewhere Holloway can't find me." "And let him drive you away from a place you've made your home, from people who care about you," Elijah shook his head. "No, Emma, running isn't the answer, not anymore." That night, Elijah had trouble sleeping. He kept thinking of the veiled threat in Holloway's words, the dangerous glint in his eyes. Eventually, he rose and checked the locks on the doors and windows, then retrieved his shotgun from the rack and kept it close at hand. His vigilance proved warranted when, 3 days later, Elijah returned from checking the fence line to find Emma frantically trying to extinguish a fire that had started in the barn. Together, they managed to control the blaze before it spread beyond a corner of the structure, saving the animals and most of the hay. "How did it start?" Elijah asked as they surveyed the damage, which was thankfully minimal. Emma shook her head, soot streaking her face. "I don't know. I was in the house, baking. When I looked out the window, I saw smoke." Elijah examined the charred wood carefully. In a corner, partially hidden beneath debris, he found fragments of a broken bottle that smelled of kerosene. "This was deliberate," he said, showing Emma the evidence. "Someone started this fire on purpose." Emma's hand flew to her mouth. "Holloway, I'd bet my ranch on it." Elijah's voice was hard with anger. "But he wouldn't have done it himself. too refined to get his hands dirty, must have paid someone. The implication was clear. Holloway was escalating from threats to action. That evening, after a subdued supper, Emma joined Elijah on the porch. The spring night was cool but pleasant, the sky a vast canvas of stars above them. "I've been thinking," Emma said after a while, "about what you said about not running anymore. And you're right. If I keep running, Holloway wins. He's taken enough from me already, my reputation, my livelihood. I won't let him take my dignity as well." She turned to face him, her expression resolute in the moonlight. "But I won't put you in danger either, Ellie. This is my fight." Elijah reached out hesitantly at first, then with more confidence when she didn't pull away and took her hand. "I'm already in this fight, Emma, by choice." "Why?" The question was soft, vulnerable. Because Elijah paused, gathering his courage. "Because in these past weeks you've become more than just my employee, more than a friend even." He met her gaze steadily. "I care for you, Emma, deeply." Emma's eyes widened, and for a terrifying moment Elijah thought he'd overstepped. Then her fingers tightened around his. "I care for you too, Illy, more than I thought possible after everything." The admission hung between them, fragile and precious. Elijah wanted to pull her close, to kiss her under the starlit sky, but he knew she needed time. They both did. Instead, he squeezed her hand gently. "Then we face this together, and when it's over, when Holloway is gone from our lives, we can talk about what comes next." Emma smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her since Holloway's arrival in Lusk. "I'd like that." The next morning, Elijah rode into town alone, heading straight for the hotel. He found Holloway in the small dining room, leisurely enjoying his breakfast. "Mr. Ryder," Holloway said, not bothering to hide his surprise or displeasure. "To what do I owe this intrusion?" Elijah remained standing, ignoring the curious glances from the few other patrons. "I know what you did, Holloway. The fire at my barn." Holloway raised an eyebrow, setting down his fork. "I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about. I've been right here in town, as the hotel staff can attest." "We both know you wouldn't soil your hands with the actual work, but it was your doing all the same." "That's quite an accusation, Mr. Ryder. Do you have any evidence to support it?" Holloway's tone was mocking. Elijah leaned closer, lowering his voice so only Holloway could hear. "Listen to me carefully. Emma doesn't want you. She never did. Your attention is unwanted, your presence here unwelcome. If you have any sense of self-preservation, you'll get on the next train east and never return to Wyoming territory." Holloway's face hardened. "Are you threatening me, Ryder?" "I'm giving you a chance to leave with your pride intact. Next time, it won't be a warning." "You're making a grave error," Holloway hissed, abandoning his pretense of civility. "Do you have any idea who I am? Who my associates are? I could buy and sell this entire pathetic town 10 times over." "Maybe in Denver you're somebody important," Elijah replied, straightening. "But out here, you're just another city man who doesn't know the first thing about survival." He turned to leave, then added, "Stay away from my ranch and stay away from Emma, or you'll learn exactly how serious I am." As Elijah walked back to his horse, he knew his confrontation with Holloway had likely only escalated the situation. But he couldn't stand by while the man terrorized Emma and threatened his home. What he didn't expect was to return to the ranch and find Emma gone. Panic gripped him as he searched the house and barn, calling her name. There was no sign of struggle, but her shawl was missing, along with the small bundle of possessions she'd arrived with. On the kitchen table lay a note, written in Emma's neat hand. "Dear Ellie, I cannot bear to see you harmed because of me. Holloway is dangerous, and I fear what he might do next. By the time you read this, I'll be on my way. Please don't follow. Know that these weeks with you have been the happiest of my life, and I will carry the memory of your kindness always. With deepest affection. Elijah crumpled the note in his fist, fear and determination warring within him. He would not let her face Holloway alone. Quickly, he checked his revolver, grabbed his rifle, and rode back toward town at a gallop. The station master confirmed his suspicion. Emma had purchased a ticket on the afternoon train to Cheyenne, due to depart in less than an hour. Elijah left his horse at the livery and hurried to the platform, scanning the small crowd for any sign of Emma. He spotted her standing alone near the end of the platform, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders despite the mild day. Relief washed over him as he approached. Emma. She turned, her eyes widening in surprise and dismay. Illy, how did you really think I'd let you leave like that, without even saying goodbye? I left a note, she said weakly. A note isn't goodbye. Elijah moved closer, lowering his voice. Emma, running away isn't the answer. We agreed on that, remember? That was before the fire, before I realized how far Holloway is willing to go. Her voice trembled. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me, and I couldn't bear letting you face him alone. Elijah took her hands in his. Come back to the ranch, Emma, please. We'll figure this out together. Emma hesitated, conflict evident in her eyes. Well, isn't this touching? The cold voice behind them made Emma freeze. Elijah turned to find Holloway approaching, flanked by two rough-looking men who were clearly hired muscle. Mr. Holloway, Elijah said evenly, positioning himself slightly in front of Emma. I thought I might find you here, Emma, Holloway said, ignoring Elijah completely. Though I admit, I expected you to be fleeing in the opposite direction. His smile was reptilian. No matter. My associates and I will be happy to escort you back to Denver. She's not going anywhere with you, Elijah stated firmly, his hand moving toward his holster. Holloway's eyes flicked to the gesture. I wouldn't if I were you, Ryder. My friends here are quite proficient with firearms. Besides, we wouldn't want any innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire, would we? Elijah was acutely aware of the other passengers on the platform, including women and children. A confrontation here could turn deadly for more than just those involved. Mr. Holloway, Emma spoke up, her voice stronger than Elijah expected. I have no intention of returning to Denver with you. Not now, not ever. I'm afraid you don't have a choice, my dear. Holloway signaled to his men, who moved to flank them. Now we can do this quietly or we can make a scene. It's entirely up to you. Elijah tensed, calculating his odds against the two hired guns. Before he could act, however, a new voice joined the conversation. Is there a problem here, gentlemen? Sheriff Davis approached, his badge gleaming in the afternoon sun. Behind him were two deputies, both armed. Holloway's confidence faltered slightly. No problem at all, Sheriff. Just a private matter between myself and Miss Vale. Doesn't look private to me, Davis observed dryly, especially with your friends here looking ready for trouble. He turned to Emma. Miss Vale, are you being bothered by these men? Emma straightened, drawing strength from the sheriff's presence and Elijah's steady support. Yes, Sheriff. Mr. Holloway has been threatening me. He's trying to force me to return to Denver against my will. Is that so? Davis's hand rested casually on his holster. Mr. Holloway, we don't take kindly to that sort of behavior in Lusk. I think it's time for you and your associates to leave town. Today's train to Cheyenne leaves in 40 minutes. I suggest you be on it. Holloway's face flushed with anger. You can't do this. I have rights. Yes, you do, Sheriff Davis agreed. And one of those rights is to leave peacefully. The alternative involves a stay in my jail until the circuit judge arrives next month. Your choice. For a tense moment, it seemed Holloway might resist. Then, with a look of pure hatred directed at Emma and Elijah, he signaled to his men to stand down. "This isn't over," he spat. "You'll regret this, both of you." "Perhaps," Sheriff Davis interjected. "I didn't make myself clear. If you or your men come within 100 yards of Miss Vale or Mr. Ryder again, I'll arrest you for threatening a citizen of this territory." And frontier justice tends to be harsh. With a final venomous glare, Holloway retreated, his hired guns following reluctantly. "My deputies will escort Mr. Holloway to the train and make sure he boards it," Davis told Emma and Elijah. "I'll also wire the sheriff in Cheyenne to keep an eye on him until he leaves the territory." "Thank you, Sheriff," Elijah said, relief evident in his voice. "Don't mention it." Davis smiled kindly at Emma. "Miss Vale, are you all right?" Emma nodded, though she was still trembling slightly. "Yes, thanks to you and Ellie." "Will you be returning to the Ryder Ranch?" Emma glanced at Elijah, uncertainty in her eyes. "If she wants to," Elijah said softly. The sheriff looked between them, understanding dawning on his weathered face. "Well, I'll leave you two to sort that out. Good day." As Davis walked away to instruct his deputies, Elijah turned to Emma. "Please come home, Emma, unless you truly want to leave." Emma studied his face for a long moment, then a small smile curved her lips. "I don't want to leave, Ellie. I never did." The relief that washed over him was so profound that Elijah nearly staggered with it. Without thinking, he pulled Emma into a tight embrace, inhaling the scent of lavender and sunshine that he'd come to associate with her. "I thought I'd lost you," he murmured against her hair. Emma's arms wrapped around him, returning the embrace with equal fervor. "I'm sorry. I thought I was protecting you." "Don't ever do that again," Elijah said, drawing back to look into her eyes. "Whatever comes, we face it together. Promise me." "I promise," Emma whispered, her gaze holding his with newfound certainty. They returned to the ranch as the afternoon sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the land. The familiar sight of the cabin and barn, the whinnying greeting from the horses, all felt different, somehow more like home than ever before. That evening, as they sat side by side on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues, Emma finally shared her full story. She spoke of her childhood in Boston, of losing her parents to influenza when she was 16, of making her way as a governess in increasingly western cities until she reached Denver. She told Elijah of her dreams of someday having her own school, of teaching children who might otherwise have no education. In turn, Elijah opened up about the loneliness he'd felt since his father's death, of the weight of maintaining the ranch alone, of the quiet ache for family that had never quite left him. As the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, Elijah took Emma's hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her skin. "I'm glad you found my hayloft that night, Emma Vale," she smiled, her eyes reflecting the last golden rays of sunlight. "So am I, Elijah Ryder, so am I." The following weeks passed in a blissful routine as spring deepened into early summer. Emma and Elijah worked side by side during the day, their labors shared and lightened by each other's company. In the evenings, they would sit together, sometimes reading aloud from Elijah's small collection of books, sometimes simply talking late into the night. Their relationship evolved naturally, each day bringing them closer. The first kiss came one evening as they walked back from checking the newly planted vegetable garden. It was gentle and brief, but it sparked something profound between them, a promise of more to come. Word arrived from Sheriff Davis that Victor Holloway had indeed left Wyoming territory, boarding a train east from Cheyenne. The news lifted a weight from Emma's shoulders, and Elijah noticed a new lightness in her step, a brightness in her smile that had been shadowed by fear. It was a month after Holloway's departure when Emma disappeared from the ranch for the second time. Elijah had ridden out at dawn to check on a pregnant mare in the north pasture, returning mid-morning to find the cabin empty. Panic gripped him momentarily until he spotted a note on the table, "Gone to gather wildflowers by the creek. Back soon." Relief washed over him, followed by a chuckle at his own anxiety. Holloway was gone, yet Elijah found himself still protective, perhaps overly so. He busied himself with chores, checking periodically for Emma's return. By mid-afternoon, with no sign of her, concern began to creep in again. The creek was less than a mile away. Gathering flowers shouldn't have taken this long. Elijah saddled Thunder and rode in the direction of the creek, calling Emma's name. He found her, to his immense relief, asleep in the hayloft of his barn. She was curled on her side, surrounded by bundles of wildflowers in various stages of being woven into garlands. The sight was so reminiscent of the first time he'd found her there that it made his heart ache with tenderness. "Emma," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to recognition. "Illy," she sat up quickly. "I was working on something for the cabin and I must have fallen asleep. I'm sorry if I worried you. It's all right." Elijah sat beside her, picking up one of the partially completed flower garlands. "These are beautiful. I wanted to surprise you." Emma smiled sheepishly. "I thought they might brighten up the cabin." Elijah looked at the woman before him, her hair slightly mussed from sleep, cheeks flushed, eyes bright with affection, and knew with sudden clarity what he wanted more than anything. "Emma," he began, setting the garland down carefully. "These past months with you have been the happiest of my life." Her smile softened. "Mine too, Illy. I know we haven't known each other long by some standards, and I don't have much to offer except this ranch and my heart, but I can't imagine my life without you in it." He took her hand, his own trembling slightly with the weight of the moment. "I love you, Emma Vale." Emma's breath caught, her eyes widening. "Illy, you don't have to say it back," he assured her quickly. "I just wanted you to know and to ask if you'd consider staying here." "Not as my housekeeper, but as my—" "Yes," Emma interrupted, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I'll stay. And yes, I love you too, Elijah Ryder, with all my heart." The world seemed to still around them as Elijah leaned forward, cupping Emma's face gently in his hands, and kissed her with all the love that had been building in his heart since the day he found her sleeping in his hayloft. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and smiling, Elijah rested his forehead against hers. "I should probably do this properly." Emma laughed softly. "You don't have to. This is perfect." Nevertheless, Elijah shifted to kneel before her, taking her hands in his. "Emma Vale, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears glistened in Emma's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Lusk, with Sheriff Davis, the Millers, and a few of Elijah's neighboring ranchers in attendance. Emma wore a simple cream-colored dress that Mrs. Miller had helped her make, with a crown of wildflowers in her hair. Elijah, in his best suit, couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked down the aisle toward him. The preacher's words seemed both eternal and fleeting as they exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other for all their days. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Elijah kissed his bride with a tenderness that brought tears to more than a few eyes in the congregation. The celebration afterward was modest but joyful, with food and dancing at the town hall. As the evening drew to a close, Elijah and Emma thanked their guests and rode back to the ranch, their ranch now, in every sense. The cabin had been transformed in their absence. Mrs. Miller and some of the other women from town had decorated it with Emma's wildflower garlands, lit lamps in every window, and left a small wedding cake on the table. A new quilt, clearly a gift from the community, adorned the bed. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ryder," Elijah said softly as he carried Emma over the threshold. Emma's arms tightened around his neck as she smiled up at him. "I like the sound of that." Later that night, as they lay wrapped in each other's arms beneath the new quilt, Emma traced the line of Elijah's jaw with gentle fingers. "I never thought I could be this happy. After everything with Holloway, I was afraid to trust anyone again." "I'm glad you trusted me," Elijah murmured, turning to press a kiss to her palm. "How could I not? You found me sleeping in your hayloft twice, and the third time I brought a blanket and a proposal," Elijah finished with a smile. "Though technically, the proposal came later." Emma laughed, the sound like music to his ears. "The details aren't important. What matters is that you saw someone in need and offered help without expecting anything in return. That's the man I fell in love with." Elijah pulled her closer, marveling at the twist of fate that had brought this remarkable woman into his life. "I think I started falling for you that very first night, when you sat at my table trying so hard to maintain your dignity, despite being hungry and afraid." "And now?" Emma asked, her eyes searching his in the moonlight filtering through the window. "Now I love you more than I have words to express, and I'll spend the rest of my days showing you just how much." As the seasons changed and the years passed, the Ryder ranch flourished under their combined care. Emma, true to her dream, started a small school in a spare room of their expanding home, teaching the children of neighboring ranchers as well as their own. Their first child, a son they named James after Elijah's father, arrived a year after their wedding, a strong, healthy boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's sandy hair. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Sarah, with a mischievous smile and an adventurous spirit. Life on the frontier was never easy. There were harsh winters, dry summers that threatened the crops, and the constant challenges of raising livestock and children simultaneously. But through it all, Elijah and Emma faced each trial together, their love deepening with each passing day. On their 5th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Emma leaned her head against Elijah's shoulder. "You ever think about how different our lives might have been if I hadn't chosen your barn to sleep in that night?" Elijah wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her closer. "Sometimes. But then I remember something my father used to say. There are no accidents in this life, son, only opportunities disguised as chance." Emma smiled, watching as James helped his little sister up after a tumble. "He was a wise man, your father. He would have loved you," Elijah said softly, "almost as much as I do." As the sun set on another day on their Wyoming ranch, casting long shadows across the land they'd built together, Elijah and Emma Ryder counted themselves blessed, not in spite of the hardships they'd faced, but because of how those challenges had brought them together and forged a love stronger than either had ever dared to dream possible. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep, they would climb up to the hayloft where their story began. There, surrounded by the sweet scent of hay and memories, they would remind each other of the remarkable journey from strangers to soulmates, from fear to trust, from loneliness to a family bound by love as vast as the Wyoming sky above them. It had been 15 years since Elijah had found Emma sleeping in his hayloft that first night. The ranch had grown, as had their family. James, now 14, was nearly as tall as his father and showed a natural talent for working with horses. 12-year-old Sarah had her mother's gift for teaching and often helped with the younger students in Emma's school. And their youngest, 8-year-old Thomas, was a curious child with a love for books and the natural world. The town of Lusk had grown as well, with the railroad bringing more settlers and commerce. Elijah and Emma had become respected fixtures in the community, he as a successful rancher and occasional deputy, when Sheriff Davis needed help. She as the schoolteacher who had educated many of the town's children. On the anniversary of the day they met, Elijah still brought Emma to the hayloft with a blanket and a small gift, a tradition they had maintained through all their years together. This year, as they sat side by side watching the sunset through the barn window, Emma rested her head on his shoulder. "I was thinking about that proposal today," she said, a smile in her voice. "How nervous you looked kneeling there among the wildflowers." Elijah chuckled, his arm tightening around her waist. "I was terrified you might say no. As if I could have." Emma tilted her face up to his. "You saved me in more ways than you know, Illy." "And you saved me right back," he replied, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "From a life of solitude I didn't even realize I was drowning in." As the last rays of sunlight faded and stars began to appear in the vast Wyoming sky, they held each other close, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought a desperate young woman to a lonely rancher's hayloft all those years ago, and for the love that had blossomed from that chance encounter, growing stronger with each passing day. In the end, it wasn't the ranch or the children or the respect of the community that they treasured most, though all were precious. It was the knowledge that they had found in each other not just a partner, but a home, a place of acceptance, understanding, and unwavering love that would sustain them through whatever challenges life might bring. And as Elijah looked at his wife, her face as beautiful to him now as it had been that first night, he knew with absolute certainty that finding Emma Vale sleeping in his hayloft had been the greatest blessing of his life, one he would be thankful for until his dying day.